of, the state of the state. He gave a report, and he said that here in California, the Chinese, the Negro, and the Indians are looked so far down upon, they're never gonna get a fair shake in here. And they're not gonna be able to ever assimilate in. People have their prejudices, it's not gonna work. And he gave this speech, and it was like, wow, he was really sympathetic toward them. No, he wasn't. The last part of his speech was, there's only one solution. These people are never gonna fit here. There's no place to relocate them where they're gonna fit. Every one of them has to be exterminated. Men, women, and children. And I don't remember right now who it was assigned to, but you got $10 a head for each Indian you brought in, or $25, and I don't remember male or female, which was which. But the numbers were $10 and $25. Back in the 1850s, that's a fair chunk of change. Every governor till 1903 kept that going, bringing in Indian, and the state of California paid for the heads, and now that was his solution. Well, one of the reasons is like I say, when was the gold rush? 1849. Hey, it's our it's our destiny to take over this land. Well, if they own part of the gold fields, hey, they're in the wrong spot. Too bad, so sad. They had to be eliminated. That was the thinking at the time. So their land was taken away from them. They also passed Chinese laws until 1930 that you couldn't own property. He originally came from Oregon before he came to California. And in Oregon, if you were a free black person, you were not allowed to live in Oregon. You had to go find another state. And he signed it into law anyway, and everybody in town called it, or that's a flogging law. If you were caught, you were to be flogged and then taken out of the state if you were a black person. So when he gives this compassionate speech about how these people are being mistreated, I believe he's one of the really true politicians of the era. He's saying that, but then he's putting bounties on their head. Right? So a lot of the Native Americans, especially up north in Sacramento in the gold country, I mean, they were literally just eliminated and exterminated. They were not run off, they were shot and killed. Around here, why didn't that happen here? There was nobody else here. Emil Curtis didn't even come here until 1862. And a lot of people didn't believe in that. Emil Curtis had the first homestead in this area, and they're the ones who, Southern Pacific bought Emil Curtis's homestead, and he lived on where C Street is at. Thanks. So a lot of the history was lost. So when Lotto went and talked to these couple of Indians that were over 100 years old, that was a rare thing to find, because these people had been running for, and like I say, it lasted from 1853 to 1903, that you could murder an Indian, cut off his head, use it for evidence to bring in and get a reward for it. So I don't want to cut Roger out of his time, because he's a lot more interesting than I am.
I wasn't that.
Yes?
Just a quick question. Maybe I missed it, but how big was the tribe when you said they had 2 chiefs and the people on the outside and all that? How big was the tribe at that time?
No, that because they never went this far, the numbers are only estimates of how big they were and how they were planned. They don't know, and the people that were left, they never asked them those numbers. So there are charts in the books that show, here's our estimates by tribe, and they did it from the, well, if there's this many people living here now, and no white people live here, and they weren't busted, they were here, and it's like, to me, I looked at it and I read how they got the information, and it's a best guess. And I don't like doing best guesses when you're trying to compile historical data. Keep searching until you get a yes.
Is there an approximate date when was Huron established?
No. Other than this map, this is the only place that even says it's only on here. Now, here's something else that's very interesting. Here's a map, and like I say, it's so hard to find. Guess where I got this map from? Here's a map of where all the Indian tribes were at, but I wanted a map that showed the county lines. Because as far as I could tell, it's supposed to be a different tribe in Los Gatos Canyon when you go into San Benito Canyon. How did the Indians know where the county lines were gonna be? Or were the county lines drawn where the Indians were at? No, they're guessing. I got this map of where all the tribes in the county were at. This is from the California High-Speed Rail Authority. They were in our office, they were right next door to us when I worked in LA. This is in my opinion, this is the one good thing that came out of the High-Speed Rail Authority. Now, this is the route, but here's where they established, and why did they establish this? This is for their environmental impact report. So they did some research, but it follows too close to the line, so I don't appreciate that. Now that other map was by A.H. Guyton in 1948, but he copied Kroeber's map. And this is Kroeber's original map from 1925, where he outlined them. And here he put the names. You cannot find any information on Golan. Right there, so it shows where Coalinga's at, because he put names where you could reference things. But Ujui, like I say, that became Pozo Chene, but the Indians all knew it as Ujui. All the rest of these, and where this is at, and Tulare Lake and all this, this is in Kroeber's book. Where do I find a big copy of this to go get reprinted? Didn't even know it was there. On the Boy Scouts of America High Adventure website. This stuff is all over. And the first stuff that's on there, everybody wants to do reports on the Chumash Indians. And so it starts with that. This is the last thing on that whole website. So I just keep going until I find something. I go, here's the map that's in that book. I won't have to recopy it. So I just copy this off of it. And so he's labeled as Comanche also. But see, once Coalinga's over here, and there is no other map for over there. The other problem with doing the history is, I did this about 11 years ago for Reedley when they were trying to save Sonoma Mountain there, the sacred site, that the county was going to let a gravel company come in and just level that hill that had their sacred site on it. They didn't know, so I went this. The books that I had were in the library at the Research and Genealogy Center on the second floor at Fresno, downtown. When you got to the pages with the maps, somebody cut them out. So not only do they desecrate the Indian sites, they desecrate the books for the stuff that they want to reproduce these. So thanks to the Boy Scouts of America, I was able to find this on their website. And this one here is very, very, very detailed. Okay, Roger, I said I'd give it to you.
Okay, George, one last question.
That's good. Thank you.
Is there any value in the mission system history around Indian tribes and locations?
No, and here's what they say. The Spaniards had the missions. They set up the missions. Then it was turned over to Mexican rule. Then they became more like rancheros, and they were privately owned until the state took them back over. They can't find any records, so they don't know. San Juan Bautista was a big Indian collection site, but there's nothing there of how many Indians and where they all came from. The records are gone.
Like the local lore of, where the priests hung the bells in the trees in Priest Valley, that extended clear down to fourth grade for me, So,
Yeah.
Interesting, thank you.
So, leading on to some of the information, before I get into what I was going to talk about, when you go to put a presentation together, you keep hitting these forks in the road. So how far do you go down each stream? Because there's hours and hours of information from different places. A lot of it's repetitive. But I ran across a book up at Kings Canyon National Park that I found fascinating. And this is written by Frank Latta, but he gives the credit to Thomas Jefferson Mayfield. And while Latta was looking for information, he discovered there wasn't much, and there was a language barrier, and there was a trust issue. So a lot of the people of the Indian culture did not want to tell a lot of the stories to or outside of their own people. So he started looking for someone or some people he could talk to. He ran into some older people that were Indians, but he heard the rumors of a man who had come over with his parents in the 1860s and had settled here. His mom had died when he was young, and the Indian village next to them raised him. So he was raised as a white man in the Indian village. And when he hit his 20s, he found out every time he made reference to being in connection with the Indians, he got beat up. So he never spoke of it again. Now the man's in his 80s, and Lotta found out he was living either above Porterville or Exeter, and he spent the last year of that man's life documenting his stories. And it turned out the man was ready to talk. He had all this stuff he'd like everybody to know, but he'd been afraid to talk about it. So, to me, it shows a little the integrity of Lotta. He compiled all this, but he gave the credit to the man that told the story, not him as document. It's a really interesting book to read. One little footnote that I find really interesting in the book is his dad was in the Civil War, and they're wanting to put people in California, have a population. So they offered a package to the veterans that they would give them money to come and settle in California. So they come by ship, they come into San Francisco, and he writes, they come in and they buy a wagon, and I forget just what all they had, but they come up over a pass, and they find a place to stay. And there's a place to stable a horse, and a place to get a room, and the place was called San Jose. And that was all that was there at that time. And there's a lot of good description in that book. So this is a USGS map, and you're not going to get much other than this, other than kind of where I'm concentrating is going to be from Donut Rock, and it's going to go up past Walking Rocks, 3 Rocks. And a little story that was handed down originally by oral tradition. When the first Spaniards came in here, supposedly in the late 1700s, like I said, this is before they were documenting anything, they asked, where did all this stuff come from? They found bedrock mortars, they found petroglyph panels, and the description was it came from the bear, the eagle, and the coyote. And so within further investigation, it just meant it was here before we were here. And so there's a lot missing in the timeline. We do know that when you study the rainfall, that in both the 2nd century and in the late 1800s, early 1200s, it was massive drought. Potentially 10 years rain total over 50 years. And so the Indian population pretty much, what survived on the coast. And then later they would come back in. So the guess is they left during one of these droughts. And then when they came back in, they found this stuff. So we don't know how old it is. There's a guess. I'm going to show one particular rock, and they tried to anchor a date around it. I'll mention later. And it's all guess. So there's Donut Rock. And there's been a lot of speculation of who this girl is, because there's 2 different girls that were supposedly had pictures taken late 60s, early 70s.
That's Kathy Jackson.
Huh?
Right.
Is it?
Jackson, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So there it is standing. That is pre-earthquake. That's what it looks like today with me standing in it with what's left. This picture doesn't show a date. I think it's about 2006. Start talking dates. And so some of it is still there. So we followed this trail, and we made 15 years worth of trips up there, looking at different locations. When I say we, Ray Iddings and Ron Wiltshire. Ray had an interest in archaeology because his dad and his uncle did. So he grew up over in Bitterwater and continued with his interest, became an electrical engineer, lived in Santa Cruz, so they got an archaeology school, and he got his 4-year degree in archaeology. And what he told me is nobody's going to listen to me, so he went back and got his master's degree. And he got pretty fed up because he said it's an inside group and they don't want to hear anything from anybody else that's been on the ground. They've already made their mind up of what's there, on their major colleges. And this presentation I put together originally when we were invited into Fresno State University for the California State Archaeologist and the county. But we found out, I'm glad I didn't see it because I was so nervous. Here I am just learning this stuff. You're going to talk to people with PhDs. So I just showed the pictures as a tour guide, a little bit like what I'm going to do today. We found out a whole bunch of people left in the back. They were insulted because we don't have a degree, but we discovered it. And they want to know why do we have a degree? And so the president of the group said, we're going to have a little lecture to them and tell them they need to get off their butt. You don't find anything sitting in an air-conditioned office. And I think that's part of the reason there's not a lot of good information. So, as we're walking down the trail, we found several places where the rocks had cupule art. This was a unique one. It's right in the trail, and it's on rock, and there's a hard rock in the softer rock, the way it's eroded. The Indians have put little holes all over it. And we started noticing those, so we went back and we started looking, and I made the comment that every time we see one of these, we can see what we call Inspiration Point, Castle Rock. So, and the other two had cupule sites on a panel. And does it mean anything? So I look over about from here to that green door, and there's yucca plants that tall with spikes. And I have to go around and get into it, and on the back of that panel, and there's more cupule. You see they're worn. This stuff is old. Cupule art is found more so here than almost anywhere else in the United States. The exact meaning of a lot of it's not known. There's nobody left here to tell us about it. A little further up the trail, there's a lot of, we call them shelters, where the sandstone's been eroded. And this one had found pieces of chipping, like they'd made arrowheads. So we start digging in the sand, and what we finally mostly find is the top of old tin cans. And so we find that anywhere where the American Indians were, well, later people went to the same place because there's water, there's shelter, there's shade. People like the same thing. And you see the smoke. They had fires. If you've got an indention in the rock and you build a fire, it heats the back wall up. So it does a fairly decent job keeping you warm if it's cold. Yeah, this bedrock mortars. We're walking down the trail now, so we're headed kind of northwest, and there's stuff all along the trail. The trail started out with the Indians using it. When the miners came in here, they used the same trail. It got widened in a couple spots. It got moved in one spot where it was real narrow, because we figured they might have been taking like a cart or something over it. We know later they brought in mules and packed things in. Now here's that. This rock right here has got mortars all over the top. This is very close to a spring site. I've got a picture a little later where we believe there was a spring and the whole hillside sloughed off. It stays green. So they actually had a hydroarchaeologist come up and look at it and determine that there was a spring, and it had probably been at surface at one time. And there's the same rock from up on top. You can kind of see the mortars down in here. Some of them are pretty good size. I've got one bowl with a pestle sitting over here you can look at. When we're done, I'll have a couple of books I'll set out you can look through. There's one of the mortars that gives you an idea of the depth and size of it. There's some little ones. Like I said, you're walking down the trail and you see the stuff off 10 feet off the trail, 20 feet off the trail. If you get off the beaten path, and I'll show you a couple of them where we stumbled across a whole site by accident. And there's the trail. And you can see that a lot of dirt bikes are running up and down it also. That's pretty much keeping it beat down. So, we come to a point where it's kind of like a fork in the road. This is the rocks around Castle Rock up at what it's also called Inspiration Point. Kind of unique area. So when you walk into it, you can see openings where you can walk up between the rocks. I went up there one afternoon. Ray and Ron wanted to go down and stage some equipment. They said they'd be back in 45 minutes. And so we're camped right down below it. So I go up a crack in the rocks and I start walking through here. No communication. Normally carry a gun on me. I didn't take it with me. I look down and I see a print of a mountain lion that's wet. And I watch it dry up. And I figure, he just went in front of me within 90 seconds. I'm in his territory. I got rocks overhead. I could not get back to camp fast enough. Now, it's hazy. This is in the middle of that group of rocks with a photograph taken down of Coalinga. Somewhere, I've got some pictures from the 35 millimeter put away. It's a lot slower to go through those than it is the digital stuff. But I've got one where it's kind of neat. It's another opening with a limb back off in it, and you can actually outline some of the streets in Coalinga. I need to find that photograph. So a little further up the trail, this is called Ray's Camp. You can see the rock with a bedrock mortar in it. That's kind of neat. You get sandstone, and in sandstone you've got hard rock. So as it erodes, the hard rock falls out. And you'll find a lot of that up there. It's kind of neat little pockets. It's kind of neat looking. So that's probably what came out of there. And there's the mortar, bedrock mortar. So I went back up there and was going to look on top. And Ray told me, hey, there's two more on top. So I'm not looking. And I'm standing literally with it between my feet, and there's a coiled up rattlesnake sitting right up there looking at me. I just very slowly backed up. I don't think I ever did look and see what was on top of that big rock. So as we head down the trail a little ways, there's a dozer trail that was put in years ago, and you can walk up over into Walking Rocks. And as we come over the crest of the rock, just as Walking Rocks are visible, there again, something became visible. We find cupial art. So it kind of makes you ask a question. Is one of the purposes of the cupial art, if you keep seeing it when there's a fork in the road or there's something substantial to see, is that telling you, was that a roadmap for them? Best belief is they didn't live up there seasonally. Maybe down in Los Gatos Canyon, there's a lot more evidence of occupancy coming down from Coalinga. There's evidence of trading from the Chilean, the Chumash, and the Yokuts. Believe the Yokuts were probably the ones that were up there the most. So, is that like a roadside marker, you know, Highway 33 here, going down through LA? There's nobody around left to ask. And you walk over the hill and there's Walking Rocks.